Hello, thank you all for joining. I'm going to spotlight myself just so everyone can see. My name is Izzy. I am the festival director for the Vancouver Comic Arts Festival, which is today's the last day. We still have lots of stuff up, but it's the last event. I'm coming to you from the stolen ancestral and traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam enslaved peoples. It's so important as creators to recognize what our effects are of being here, as well as kind of think about every day. It's kind of a nice thing to think about every day, how we affect the land and what we can do to make it better. I am very excited for this workshop. I think it's very cool and a lot of really cool things to your art. But I'd like to introduce the workshop leader, Marlene, first. Marlene Yuen is a Vancouver-based artist who received her Bachelor's of Studio Arts in 1998 from the University of British Columbia. Marlene has exhibited at galleries, artist-run centers, and cultural events in Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, Belgium, and Japan. Although she is a multidisciplinary artist, her current focus is on handmade books. Her artist books have been retained in special collections nationally and internationally, as they should. They're beautiful. Marlene, please take it away.
Hi, thank you for joining. I have to say, a lot of these exercises that I'm going to show you today have been pre-recorded, mainly for the reason being is I have wrist pain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain the exercises as we go on. Before we get into the exercises, I will show a bit of the artwork that I've been working on earlier on and recently. So a lot of this will take the form of PowerPoint, which I will launch right now. And I'm going to play it. So how does that look? Is it looking big? Yes. Okay, so this is the first book I've ever made, and it happened to be a pop-up book. So I took a course at Emily Carr through continuing studies, and the instructor, who is lovely, her name is Cecilia King and still teaches. I took this short course with her and I made this book, and people seem to like it. And I was like, in the past, I tend to work quite flat, 2D. So this was a way of introducing sculptural elements to a book. And I was like, oh, okay, well, let's see, what else can I do? And no, the book wasn't perfect. This is quite old. This is 2004. So, but this is pretty much the beginning of how I started with books. And then, many years later, I'm still making books, but I have evolved in different ways. And I do find that pop-up books are quite beautiful and challenging. And, but at the same time, they're kind of what they are when I make them, they are one-offs, unless you have a publisher and can get someone to remake all these mechanisms. They tend to be a labor of love. So these are one-offs. And so finding success in this pop-up books, I kind of just worked on the ideas of kind of every day. So many years ago, I went to New York and just kind of took pictures and use this as an inspiration for another pop-up book. And this one's called My New York Story. And as you can see, it does give a lot of life to a book. You can see the shadows. And when you open it, you're not expecting the sculpture to be in front of your eyes. So it's quite special, But at the same time, as an artist, I found that people wanted more. They were asking, I want to buy a copy of this book. And I was like, well, this is a one-off. So later on, I learned how to typeset, and I learned how to basically letterpress print. And this is a combination of a pop-up book and letterpress printing. So the text that you see on the side where it says Canada Goose is actually all typeset and printed on the Vandercook press. So that was back in 2009. So it's like, okay, so these are books, but around 2007, I'm always interested in comics. I love reading them as a child. I read about Archies, I just like, but I've never really received formal training, let's say. Like a lot of people I know who get into comic making, they have trained as illustrators. And I basically, I have a undergraduate degree in fine arts, but I took a short course through the PNCA, which is in Portland, Oregon, and it was led by various instructors. And I met Trina Robbins here, and she is a pioneer in feminist comics. And I looked up, and she's still alive. She's 82 years old, and she's pretty inspirational. And I also met Scott McCloud, who is he's a comic book theorist, and he wrote quite a few well-known books about comics, understanding comics and making comics. So after taking that course, I was like, well, maybe I'll try making comics. So one of the first ones I made was a wordless comic. And that was okay. And then later on, I did another comic about a gingerbread person. And that ended up being half digital, so it was colored in digital, and it was originally drawn in black ink. So there's a bit more of that. So that's a bit of my early history with comics. And however, there was a big pause in my life. I became a mother, and there wasn't very much time for myself, to be perfectly honest. But I had a really good opportunity by a museum in Hamilton, Ontario, and they offered me a solo show, and the topic was migrant workers in Canada, and Chinese migrant workers in Canada, and that was a big topic for me to tackle. So, and very hard, because racism is a very difficult thing to talk about. And knowing that this was a museum where there were a lot of youth programming, I thought, well, maybe I'll show it in the form of comics. So, we know that a lot of Chinese laborers first came to Canada to help finish building the railroad. So somehow I'm not able to. My arrow. Oh, sorry, my arrow got stuck. Sorry about that. Okay, seems like it doesn't like the arrow, it likes the space bar. So, and that would continue to various labors in Canada. So, including fisheries. So a lot of these comics were made in black and white ink, and then they were printed out quite large, 30 by 40. And a bit more. So just to give you some, this is a more recent work, and this was my contribution to anti-racism graphic novel book, and it isn't released yet, but it's done with various artists in Vancouver. And this is actually a scene from Spike Lee's 1989 film Do the Right Thing. So if you haven't watched it, or if you haven't watched it in a while, watch it, because there's a lot of topics that still resonate today. Okay, now we're moving on. That's enough about me, so we're going to get to work. We have supplies. And I highly recommend if you don't have this today, it's okay. We're just going to do what you can with what you have. You can even make do with scissors and paper, just a piece of paper. And what I have here is PVA glue, and it's quite good because it's strong. It's stronger than glue stick, and it's archival. So if you were to glue it down, then in a couple of years, it will still be sticking. I also highly recommend if you can get a cork back stainless steel ruler, that it's better for your safety when cutting. So these are just basic supplies. And if you're wondering in Vancouver after today, where could you get these supplies? I have listed some suppliers here. And so Paper Yacht or Opus, or if you're online shopper, then Talus is really good, but they're from the States. And another question is, glue stick is, while it is not ideal, but it will be fine for today. So when Izzy approached me to do this workshop, I was thinking, well, what can I do? I worked on a lot of heavy topics, so I really was kind of stumped, like, what should I do? So all I heard was the birds outside my window, and I thought of Jarvis Cocker. I know this sounds really weird, but like he is well known as he was the front person for Pulp, and he is still performing. So he really suggests in finding ideas in the everyday. So I found that in using his lyrics, I would be inspired to make these exercises. So I chose various songs of his to show these exercises. So the very first exercise was with one cut. And basically, you have a piece of paper, you fold it in half. And if you don't have a bone folder, that's okay. You can use a butter knife, the dull edge. So once you have folded it, you can make a cut, being careful. And if you don't have a ruler, that's okay. You can just use a scissor and try to cut straight as best as you can. And I'm using a black felt only to show you, because some things don't show very well with pencil on video. So I put 2 inches, but honestly, you can make this cut as big or as little as it needs to be. And then after you make the one cut, you're folding a little triangle and you burnish it with the bone folder. And I like to do it both sides just because it makes a very crisp fold. And once it's all burnished, you can, from the front of the page, push it out. And then you see you have this triangle that has dimensions. So this is parts that sped up. And look, we made ice cream. But I think, sorry, is this playing again? Sorry, there was a part missing. I'm going to see. Oh, there, that part was missing. So really, I think part of this video, sorry, I apologize. I'm going to go back and play again. So that was one cut. And this is still just one cut, but we're going to make 2 triangles. And I'm only using the black pen just to show you because it doesn't show up very well with pencil. And you can just cut it along the line. So I'm making 2 triangles this time. And I'm burnishing with the bone folder. But a butter knife will be fine too. So I pull them open so it becomes like a mouth. So you could do a frog. But for me, I chose to make the triangles a little bit smaller and make it a beak for a bird because I keep getting woken up by birds in the morning. So now we're going to move on to 2 cuts. And basically with 2 cuts, you can make boxes. So everything really depends on folding the page in half because this is pretty necessary to make things move. Having the mechanism activated is through the fold in the center of a paper. So if you don't have a ruler, that's fine. You can just use scissors. That's completely fine too. And I know this, I tried to use a black marker just to show it, but it's hard to see how videos would show up because my husband shot this, so with our daughter in the background, so we were just doing our best. And it doesn't have to be 2 inches. I'm just showing you what this might look like if we were to cut it this big. If you're not comfortable using a blade, scissors are great. So I make 2 parallel folds, not folds, lines, and I cut them. And then I pretty much bring it forward from the front of the page. And then after that, you can pull it and then burnish it with your fingers. You can do it with your fingers if you don't have a bone folder. And this becomes like a very simple box. But what if you made more? What if you cut a bit more of the paper? What would happen? So I'm just trying to show you a few possibilities of 2 lines. What can you do with 2 lines and 2 cuts? So if this seems a bit fast for you, this is being recorded. And if you check back with Van Calf in about a week or so, it will be reposted on their website. So I'm doing all these cuts, they're parallel and more or less equal. And then from the front, I push them forward. And you're probably wondering what is going to happen next. It's going to be a bit sped up. So just for the sake of brevity. So look, it's like quite nice, kind of looks on its own without any drawings. But you know, the funnest part about these is actually drawing or adding more to the sheet of paper. So this could be a little cityscape. Or in my case, I made it into a wardrobe. And I added an extra flap on top, and that became that's where Jarvis is. And this is, relates to the song Babies, which is one of the earlier pulp songs. So that was made with 2 cuts. Okay. So the next one, we're going to be a bit more complicated, but this is pretty much, you will need to refer to templates. And if you don't use it right now, that's okay. I'm just saying that it will be helpful if you do this afterwards with a template. And basically, it relates a lot like the first exercise, but instead of cutting it onto the paper, we're adding a V-shaped template on top of the paper. So I'm using purple here just to show you that, to give it some contrast. So that's the template that is available on that sheet. It's a PDF, and I basically trace it out really simply. And if you're not able to do it along, it's fine. It can take a bit, then you may want to just do this on your free time. So there's some tabs at the bottom, but you do want to just trace them as well if you can. And this is pretty crude tracing on my part. There is a fold in the middle, and that is very important. So after it's all been traced out, you can cut it and place it onto the blank sheet. So I often burnish the tabs. It just makes it a bit more crisp with the bone folder, but if you can use a butter knife. So I'm placing this V fold onto the blank sheet. The middle part of the V should be placed close to the middle fold of the big sheet of paper. And what is really important with this structure is to make sure that angles on both sides are as equal as possible, but I'm just eyeballing here. In the templates, you can place it onto they have it all measured out on the templates. But basically with white glue, I eyeballed close angles, so I'm just trying to make sure that both parts look equal as much as possible. White glue does take longer to dry, so right here, you can see there's this V structure. So what you will find when it's somewhat dried out, you should be able to close this structure and it should be flush to the page. It should close very cleanly and nicely. And then you're wondering, well, okay, what can I do with this? So, you know, everyone loves chips. I love chips. I don't know about you, but we're gonna add a bag of chips. So I often use bright colors just to show, just for, so it stands out against plain color paper. And this has all been sped up, so I don't expect anyone to work this fast. So those are my chips. Salted, because it's a long weekend. And what I do is I'm going to glue the bag of chips on one side and the actual chips on the other. You can choose whatever object you like. So the main goal here is to have all these objects fold up really tidy and nicely. So it looks really big, but when you close the sheet, it's going to look really small. So, I mean, the colors are a bit garish here, but it's just for the sake of like, so that you guys can see what I'm doing. So just white glue does take a longer to dry, but this is what I've done. I basically illustrated two plastic bags, and it relates to Jarvis Cocker's song, Further Complications. So the next one is really easy. There isn't really a, I call it noodles, but I don't know. I'm sure there's a better term for it. So again, folding the page in half. I do recommend cardstock if you're first learning. It's just about the right weight for practicing pop-ups. I find that regular printer paper quite thin, but you know, if you're able to get some heavier cardstock, it does have a good weight to it. So noodles, I'm just drawing this big spiral here. And I'm cutting it out. You'll probably see most of it is cutting, but it's again sped up for the sake of brevity and so that you're not too bored. So we have this fine looking spiral. What you can do is the middle of the spiral, just glue it right in the middle of the sheet. A good job of glue. And then while this looks like chaos, you add a bit of glue to the very end of the noodle. And it kind of has a sculptural feel and has some nice shadows. And this is how I did this jungle scene with Jarvis drinking tea. It refers to his most latest song, where he says, "Welcome to the peppermint jungle." And it's like, well, what could that be? What could that look like? So I just made this up, and I just illustrated some vines, and I think it worked out very well. So the next one is going to get harder. So this, please refer to templates 12 to 15. And basically you want this very parallel, something that's going to be floating. And in this case, I'm choosing to make a building. I'm just using, this part is pretty tedious looking, and you'll spend more time building the stilts. So the stilts have to be the same height. So there is a bit of measuring involved when cutting. So just for the sake of easy measurement, I make 1-inch marks all along this strip of paper. And the width of this strip is the width of the ruler. So there's no, I just made it wide so that when I show you, it's easier to see. If I were to make something smaller, it would be just harder on the eyes. So third mark, so those marks are every 1 inch. So I cut it at the 3-inch mark, and whatever is wasted is recycled. So this part is pretty tedious, I have to say. We're making stilts. We're going to make a building float and pop out. And if you look at it, they're like C-shaped almost. And so we have one, but this part's going to be as sped up as I could. My husband is an editor, so thank God for editing. But I make quite a few of these because to support a whole building on a sheet of paper, you would need about, definitely you need one in the middle as well. So it will make more sense as this video goes. So I'm making all these stilts. The main thing is to be as precise as possible when measuring, especially since the success of these structures depend on height being exactly the same. So making more C shapes, it's very exciting. And you're like, when's it gonna get good? When's it gonna... So it's sped up. So you see you have a series of all these C shape. They call them verticals in the pop-up books, but I just call them, they're kind of like stilts. So in the middle, I add a bit of glue and I join it together. And it kind of becomes mini structure in itself. And I know white glue is messy and not everyone has it, but you know, even dollar store white glue is completely fine. So again, folding the sheet in half. And they're like, what is, well, I thought about making a big building. And on this day, the bookstore called my daughter because she won a prize. I said, okay, we're making a bookstore. So she was super happy. So the bookstore, I'm actually going to fold it in half. And burnish it. So these C-shaped stilts, more glue. You're going to put it as close to the fold in the center as possible. And then do another one. And it doesn't look like much right now, but eventually this will become a bookstore. So more glue on top of the verticals, and the goal is to put the fold right onto the fold of the stilts, so they actually sit on them and basically hold on to your structure. And it does get quite messy, so as you can see, as it dries, it's going to hold the bookstore in the place. But you need more stilts because, you know, you want this to be a very strong structure and for it to last. So I really recommend adding more of the stilts into the sides if when possible. So I just put them on the edges and make sure that they're as parallel as possible. So ideally, when this is all dried, the bookstore would close and open, and it would be pretty flush. And yeah, in my example here, in reference to a pulp song, it's Bar Italia, which is a 24-hour coffee shop in London, which I think worked quite well. The next one is pretty challenging. We're getting into more challenging territory. So there are templates on pages 44 and 45. I recommend carbon paper if you have some, but if you don't worry. If you just want to watch the video, and this structure does take a bit of practice. So I had already cut out that one, but I'm reusing. You can reuse the template even sometimes after cutting. So I'm using color here just to show contrast. So. And carbon paper is a bit of an old-fashioned thing, but sometimes you can find it at the Staples. Opus. I tend to use a lot of painter's tape just to keep things in place so it doesn't move too much. So basically I'm tracing right onto this paper, and it's sped up just for brevity because it's kind of boring. You like watching me trace. But this template does change scenes, and it's quite clever, but it does require a lot of patience. And then it's like, ooh, so if you're really confident with a blade, this does work very well with the X-acto blade. So I'm tracing the other part, and this part is the structure that moves. It is the one that you pull up and down on. And I know this doesn't make a lot of sense, but as the exercise progresses, it will make more sense. So I would normally just cut out with scissors and as best as you can. And there's some areas that are meant to be folded and not cut out entirely. So this becomes like your pull tab. So this has been sped up. Very carefully on the healing mats, you want to cut these lines. So they're all open. And also with, this is, so the orange part is your page. That's the page of the book that stays. That needs to be cut out as well. And I know it does take a bit of dexterity, but the results are quite nice. This part needs to be cut out a little bit bigger because it's where the pull tab device will stick out, and this it'll make more sense as you watch the video. So I am actually drawing directly onto the blue scene and happy face, and then onto the other scene and another face. unhappy. So how can we make these work? So this is from behind the page. You're going to slide in your structure. And this part is probably the trickiest, is you're weaving in those pieces as if you ever done any paper weaving. So you're feeding it through every line. And it is very tricky. But if you can hang on to it and feed it through and grab onto it, that's see. So if when it works, it goes up and down. And then when it's smooth, it looks good. And then happy, sad, happy, sad. So you're like, okay. So actually I did a TV screen. And back in days when people watched TV, it was too late, there was this color, all these colors will show up. So I did a scene in reference to Pulp's song, TV movie. So this one is a moving arm, and I felt like we were going to run out of time and we're getting really close to the end. So this is a very straightforward structure. And basically what it is, I was able to create this Jarvis washing dishes, because it refers to the song Dishes. But pretty much if you follow the template, you should be able to achieve a moving arm. And I will see, he's actually washing the dishes. But the template here provided, if you were to close it, so this is a piece of paper, it's quite, but it would be able to stick out and point. So if you were to follow that, you can make anyone point or a moving, that's exactly the same device as I used to do the goose, the Canada goose. So, and these are just some resources. I take a lot of these exercises. I asked Celia King, who I learned from, how did you get all these structures? And she recommended the first book, Paper Engineering by Mark Heiner. And that's where a lot of the structures and templates come from. If you want to go delve into more of the 3D pop-ups, then there's even more books I have listed, and they're all very good. There are a lot of online tutorials too. So that's it. Any questions? I'm going to stop sharing. I lost my mouse. Okay, stop sharing. That's it on my part for exercises. I don't know. I know that's a lot to take in, but if there's any questions.
I just want to say I thought that was wonderful. I already am cooking up some ideas for comics. Like I feel like it expanded sort of my idea of what I could do. Hopefully for everyone in the audience too. As we said before, this is being recorded. It's going to go up on our YouTube channel, which I will link to right now, so that you can subscribe, check it out. You don't have to subscribe, but like check it out later for the video, because I think it'll be really helpful when planning and doing it in the future. I've also linked Marlene's website and her Instagram, so if you do make them some yourself, I'm sure she'd love to see them. We'd also love to see them too. Yeah, it doesn't look like there's any questions right now, but thank you everyone for coming. I really enjoyed this.